You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. The issues relating to reproductive rights of women are some of the most contested rights issues worldwide, and the debate over when women should be able to terminate their pregnancy has been reignited after the British government's new Women's Minister, Maria Millar, told a newspaper she would vote to lower the abortion limit from the current 24 to 20 weeks. It's also emerged the Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt favours cutting the abortion limit from 24 to 12 weeks, and the Home Secretary and Leader of the House both support reducing the abortion limit to 22 and 20 weeks, respectively. One anti-abortion MP, Nadine Dorries, believes the termination time limit should be decreased because science has advanced so much that babies born prematurely at 24 weeks can be kept alive or nurtured back to health, which is the same legal time limit for terminating a baby. And in 2006, she introduced a private member's bill in the Commons calling for the limit to be reduced from 24 to 21 weeks. Joining the debate on The Voice of Russia is Josephine Quintavalle, a pro-life supporter and founder of Comment on Reproductive Ethics, founder of the group Justice for Women, and pro-choice Julie Bindel, and pro-life supporter Anne Scanlan from Life Charity in London. So should the abortion limit be brought in line with science? Does a fetus have a right to live, or do women have reproductive rights? Julie Bindel.
Yes, of course women have the right over their own body, or should rather. And if you look through history, you can see that men have tried to control women's sexuality, women's sexual reproduction along the way, whether this is in the name of religion or whether it's under patriarchy in general. And women have never really had a free and open choice about whether, when and how they get pregnant. So bearing in mind the levels of sexual coercion and sexual violence, even within marriage, bearing in mind the fact that we have endemic child sexual abuse, rape and sexual assault of women, which results in unwanted pregnancies, we should therefore be able to settle this argument once and for all. It should be a woman's choice to terminate a pregnancy if she so desires. Of course, we have to do this within the healthy framework. We have to recognise that there are implications for late abortions. But in countries where there is no abortion limit in terms of time, numbers of abortions have been falling. If we give women the right over their bodies, there will be fewer unwanted pregnancies and therefore fewer abortion, which nobody enjoys, nobody does for fun.
Well, Josephine Quintavalle, you're a pro-life supporter. Should abortion be brought in line with the science, or do women have the reproductive rights?
I certainly don't think it's a balancing act between a 9-month pregnancy and a life sentence, and I think we have to understand that pregnancy lasts 9 months, and I think women are very capable of going through those 9 months of pregnancy, which is a very natural process, and giving life and giving the choice of life to the baby. So I come from what I call a pro-life feminist stance. And the strapline of the Feminists for Life of America is women deserve better than abortion, and so do the babies. And I think lately we've been getting a lot of denial about when does life begin. And I think we have to start and accept the biology of human life is a reality. When an egg is fertilised and a human embryo is created, it is the beginning of life. And I don't think it has acquired rights as a pregnancy progresses. I don't think being small gives you less rights than being big. I don't think a 2-year-old has less value than a 4-year-old. I think the continuum of human life biologically is something that we should acknowledge and respect. And lately some of the pro-abortion feminists in this country have been denying that and have been waffling around about when does life begin. It begins when I think it begins. A pregnancy is what I think's a pregnancy, and when does it kick in? I think we have to start off accepting the biology. It is another human life that the woman is carrying. It's not her body. She's hosting, she's giving hospitality to a small human being.
You're talking very biologically there, and we've got a very strong sociological ideological argument as well. Julie Bindel represents that side here. Can you just explain to me what you mean by women deserve more than abortion? Or, sorry, women deserve better than abortion?
Well, I worked for 20 years as a crisis counsellor, and I experienced at the cutting edge what women's problems were and how, abortion was being put forward to them. And I think the responses that we can give to crisis pregnancy have got to be much more real. Many women are facing abortion because they've got, big problems with accommodation. I think Anne will be able to tell you a lot more about that. But I think first and foremost, we should make sure that women are not, forced up against a wall where they have absolutely no option or no choice.
OK, and Scanlan, I'd like to hear from you now.
Obviously, I agree with a lot of what Josephine said, but also Julie. I mean, I do think some of the things that are going on in society, surely we need to be addressing the problem and not getting rid of the result of the problem. If women are being abused, that's what we need to deal with. And certainly it's my experience that we see a lot of women who are coerced into having abortions. There was a programme on recently that talked about, a girl's family being stood at the front and the back of the abortion clinic to make sure she didn't escape. So I don't think that abortion is solving the problem of oppression by men at all. I think we really do have to be very clear about the debate. As Josephine says, people are waffling on about when life begins. That's not in dispute. Life, we know, begins at conception. So what we're discussing is when individuals believe that the right to life begins. And, in Jeremy Hunt's case, it's 12 weeks. In Maria Miller's, it's 20. And one might argue that 12 is a bit arbitrary because, life is a continuum. As Josephine said, a 2-year-old isn't less valuable than a 4-year-old. So I think the advent of all these wonderful 4D images has sort of given us a window on the womb so that the general public can see what's inside the womb. I mean, it is absolute nonsense to suggest to a woman at her 10-week scan that what she's carrying is that the life hasn't started yet. So, we need to recognise that. And, I have 3 children, and I believe, as a woman, my instinctive thing is to want to protect my children, and that was true even when I was pregnant. And I think it's almost like society is backing women into a corner, putting themselves in positions because their circumstances are so dire that they believe that they have no other choice than abortion. And I think we need to be offering help and support to those women to ensure that they can make the best choices for themselves.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Juliet Spare. Should the abortion limit in the UK be lowered from 24 weeks to 20? Joining the discussion is Josephine Quintavalle, a pro-life supporter and founder of Comment on Reproductive Ethics, and Anne Scanlan from the Life Charity in London and founder of the group Justice for Women and Pro-Choice, Julie Bindel.
There is no such thing as a pro-abortion feminist. Nobody is pro-abortion. We are pro-choice. Abortion is always regrettable. It can damage women psychologically and physically, and it is really a very regrettable thing to have to go through. However, what we need to look at is the fact that the onus is always on women, despite the fact that women have the least choice about our bodies and about our pregnancy. Why don't we talk about forcible vasectomies for men who refuse to pay child maintenance, forcible vasectomies for men who refuse to wear a condom? We don't, because that would be seen as utterly outrageous. So whilst I accept that, of course, late abortions can be traumatic, I'm not suggesting that there is no pain or recognition from a fetus of a particular age or stage. What I'm saying is that we're in a situation where we don't have 100% reliable pregnancy, where we have coercion and abuse of women, where we have unwanted pregnancies, and where we have children's homes that are full to bursting of unwanted children that women and men are refusing to take on as their own. We have an obsession with reproducing ourselves. We have an obsession with arguing that we should have IVF on the NHS. Awful abuses of women are going on with surrogacy. And with selling and buying eggs, which is another form of reproductive trafficking. And yet the argument is always about whether women should be allowed to terminate an unwanted pregnancy, which translates into an unwanted child.
Josephine, what's your response to that?
I think the concept of an unwanted child is worth challenging because it may not be wanted by the mother, but it certainly may not. It may be very much wanted by somebody else, and I think we do have to be careful. Also, you can't define human value on the principle that you're wanted or unwanted. I think human life has an intrinsic value, and we should ensure that we have a society where every child is wanted and every child is looked after. And I'm very happy to see that Russia, after many, many years of appallingly high abortion rates, has now brought down the upper limit for abortion. I, some years ago, met a gynecologist from Russia, and she said that some of the women that she was looking after had had up to 19 abortions, quite horrifying. So there is clearly an issue here of how not to get pregnant, and I think we can't avoid that. It seems to me we should be at a state scientifically where we could ensure some kind of fertility control that's a bit more successful than it seems to be at the moment.
Why doesn't the Catholic Church put as much time into stopping the clergy sexually abusing girls and women as it does preventing women from having abortions when they did not want to be pregnant or plan to be pregnant in the first place?
I'm actually not sure why we're talking about the Catholic Church, because certainly I'm not coming from a religious perspective at all. And if we're going to talk about
leads this debate.
well, then maybe sadly we need to talk about the BBC as well if we're talking about that. I don't think the Catholic Church is leading the debate. I think actually women are finally beginning to lead the debate, because I truly believe that women do deserve better than abortion. I'd actually go further when you're talking about, somebody wants that child. I personally have a number of friends who fell pregnant later in life when they thought their childbearing years were behind them, and their unwanted pregnancy has turned out to be a much wanted child. So if abortion had been the solution to unwanted children, we wouldn't see the increasing number of children in care. In fact, the more abortions we perform in this country, the more children we take into care. And that's a fact. And my concern is that what we're actually doing is creating a less and less caring society. So actually, by removing the unwanted child from the womb, what we're doing is ignoring the fundamental problems and the situations women find themselves in. If women are victims of rape, of incest, all those things, they are the problems that we need to be tackling. I honestly think it's a far too easy a way out to just say abortion is the solution. It's not. I think we do need to tackle all the ills we have in society, and sadly they seem to be getting worse, not better. But I certainly don't think we can lay the blame for this at the door of the Catholic Church.
And I don't think we will disagree that actually abortion is a solution. I don't think anyone here thinks that.
No, it's not a solution, but it is a right for women to control their own fertility. And if she unfortunately is pregnant when that wasn't planned, if she's pregnant through rape, that can be and is highly traumatic for her, and often for the child who grows up as an adult knowing the legacy. It's not all right to suggest that women should have to shoulder this. And it's not all right to take the responsibility away from the men who cause unwanted pregnancy. It's not all right to let the medical profession off the hook, who have yet to come up with safe and reliable contraception across the board. And we should also be looking at what consent really means for young people, where girls are pressurised into consenting to sex with boys because of the pornography that's prevalent in society, where these boys are viewing women and girls as sexual playthings that have no rights to say no. So there's obviously a lot of work to be done. But you can't take away from the fact that if you have an unwanted pregnancy and a woman or child makes the decision to abort, that anybody has the right to tell her no, so long as it's done in a safe, clinical way.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Juliet Spare. Should the abortion limit in the UK be lowered from 24 weeks to 20? And when does a fetus have a right to live? Or do women have reproductive rights? Joining the discussion around the table is Josephine Quintavalle, founder of Comment on Reproductive Ethics, and Scanlan from Life Charity in London, and founder of the group Justice for Women, Julie Bindel. Is there an argument then, though, that reducing the limit of terminating a pregnancy could give way to more underhand and backstreet clinics carrying out abortions, which would leave women in a more vulnerable position again?
I don't think that's likely to happen, because even we have to acknowledge that in the United Kingdom abortion is actually available up to birth, and the proposals here are very much just about reducing the upper limit in the normal circumstances from 24 weeks to 12 weeks. So I think all the catch-all outside that area would still be available. We're always asked about rape. What about rape? And whenever I'm asked about rape, I look the questioner in the eye and I say, I've never seen any proposals as what should happen to the rapist. Should he be killed? It's always what about rape. So in my experience, the focus goes immediately on the victim who's the mother and the victim who's the child, but very rarely on the male who's done it. There are plenty of women who've been born from rape who are out there talking about, what about me? I have a right to live, and it obviously is going to be a very traumatic experience to discover that that's how you came to be. But I've had and spoken to women who were conceived through rape. I think there's also discussions of males. Somebody was talking about one of their friends who's a priest who was conceived through rape. It's horrifying, but for a woman then to add to that, to have the trauma of abortion as well, you can't suggest that that's helping her.
Can I add to that? Because in fact there's a group in America of rape victims who are saying exactly that. They said they're actually sick to death of the abortion industry using them as a scapegoat for their arguments. And what they're saying is that they've been coerced, they've been used and abused by men, and they actually now feel that they're being used and abused by the abortion industry. And, I would say that even in the case of rape, allow for the possibility that a mother might want to love and care for her own child. And I think by this immediate response, all rape victims need to have abortions, we're kind of putting an onus on the mum that somehow she's almost doing something wrong by continuing with the pregnancy. And so I do think we really do need to look at it from the woman's perspective. I actually agree with 90% of all the things you were saying, and that's quite refreshing, because I absolutely agree. And I think the situations young people find themselves in today, but surely we need to be changing behaviour and not, just kind of erasing the problem, as it were.
Go on, Julie.
The issue is the choice, obviously. There are women who would find the idea abhorrent to abort a child, however it is conceived. And of course, I know that women can regret abortions. Many more women, it's suggested, regret not having abortions because they didn't have the choice. Look at the women who come over to England in boatloads from Ireland who are denied the right. Look at the lengths that women will go to. There are still illegal and dangerous abortions going on in the UK, in the Republic, elsewhere in the world. This is how desperate women are, and we should be giving women the choice, and no legislation should deny them that choice.
Can I point out that Ireland is the safest place for women? That is a fact, and it's certainly the safest place for women to have babies. And actually, I think that because of the difficulties women find in having abortions, and of course, Irish women come to this country, but I think it's interesting that not nearly as high percentage of Irish women choose abortion as English women. And I believe that that's because it's not readily available, and they think longer and harder about making the decision.
Because they don't have a choice.
No, they do have a choice. They can get on a boat.
They live under the tyranny of the Catholic Church.
No, they can get on a boat.
Being linked to the state. It's not easy to get on a boat.
Have to get on a boat
and pay for it
if she wants an abortion. Because that's demeaning, isn't it, to have to get on a boat?
No, I don't think so, because I absolutely believe in the woman's right to choose, but I don't think we have the right to choose to take away another human being's life. And
you just said it's all right. She can get on a boat.
If she is so determined, if she's...
Josephine.
I want to get back to this concept of choice, because I think we'll all acknowledge that sometimes choices can be wrong. So I think abortion is a wrong choice and you think it's a right choice. But I'd like to know what choices are put on the table. In my experience of doing crisis pregnancy counselling and post-abortion counselling, I often found that the reality was that the choices were not there for women. And I think we need to look into this. Just recently, a young mother with 2 children said, I can't face my 3rd pregnancy because I've got no accommodation. I just don't know where to go from here. And I think you have to be fair. that the pro-life organisations do try their very hardest to offer choices, to offer different choices, to get into the business of negotiating for them. I've even gone to the extreme of having to call the police to rescue a Muslim woman who was being held hostage by her family, and the abortion was going to be forced upon her in this country. And it's in, it's...
Why was an abortion going to be forced upon her?
Because she was having a relationship with a partner who wasn't from the same caste as her, and it was not approved of. She'd gone through a whole process of counselling with her family present, and I was absolutely shocked to think that in this day and age a counselling session could include members of the family when a woman is looking...
Outrageous.
Yeah. And the police did actually act on the information that we put forward, and she was extricated from the situation. I don't know anything more about it. If it was a happily ever after, I suspect the girl had a very difficult life after that as well. So choices have got to be, as I say, some can be wrong. I think abortion's wrong, you think it's right. But I'd like to know what...
abortion is right. I think abortion should be available. I don't think any medical procedure that leaves a woman vulnerable and traumatised is right and good and happy. Women don't go out and have...
And the baby's dead.
Yes, but women don't go out to have abortions because it's fun. Yeah. Women never enjoy having abortions. And women do not use abortion as a form of contraception. Contraception fails. The consent within their relationship fails. And what is absolutely amazing to me is the double standard that we have. So we think it's outrageous that a woman should be forced into an abortion, but we think that it's outrageous a woman chooses to have an abortion. It's all coming from the same thing. Men's control of women's reproduction is wrong. And the other thing is this, the hypocrisy amongst some people who argue that abortion is always wrong. I was in Nevada and Florida doing some research on the death penalty, and I can't tell you how many people I met who are pro-death penalty for convicted criminals but anti-abortion.
I don't understand that either, but sorry, you were
going to say. Anne, go on.
And I absolutely agree with that, but I think ultimately, yes, women have to have control over their own bodies. But I think basically, it is a balance of rights. We have to be absolutist in our thing because we all know it's taking the life of an unborn child. And for me, ethically, that just cannot be right. I recognise that we have to reach out and we need to help and support women who are faced with this decision. But our experience is very different from what you see. Certainly what we see for women who come to us, mostly for post-abortion counselling, is that they feel hugely pressurised to make that decision, normally by men. And so my experience is actually that still, we believe somehow, I find it's interesting to be sitting around a table and we would all claim to be feminists, we're all coming from different perspectives, but I find it really incredible that, we are still being subjected to these sorts of things, but actually surely we need to empower women to be able to have their children and to have them safely. I really find it astonishing that we think that abortion is the solution to social problems. We see time and time again women terribly, terribly traumatised as a result of abortion, and they felt they were railroaded through the abortion industry and nobody really asked them what they wanted. So I think we need to start listening to women.
Agreed, we all need to start listening to women. But in the question that, abortion is not a social solution, the rhetoric coming from the government then, in that Maria Millar has wanted to decrease the limit, Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt comes out and says it, should they not be giving messages then on preventing pregnancy, not talking about the actual abortion time limit? Surely their role in government would be more useful doing that, Josephine?
Yes, I quite agree. We might not all agree about what we consider ideal sex education and contraceptive provision, etc., because some contraceptive devices have got more of an abortifacient nature than others. But I think this is probably something where we're totally in agreement. We should. And we should be empowering young girls, I think, very much to understand that they can say no, which I think is an aspect that I've picked up often, the vulnerability of girls of thinking it's what you're supposed to do, and it is more and more difficult. I did just want make one comment re the death penalty, because I think it needs to be sorted out. I'm terribly glad we don't have it in this country, because I'd be out campaigning against that as well, Julie. But what I want to say, there's a slight difference. The death penalty can be applied to somebody who's innocent by mistake, but in abortion you have to understand that whose life is lost. The unborn child is not guilty of anything. So there is a big difference in drawing parallels between those two kinds of endings of life. So I just wanted to make that very clear.
I think that the government has a responsibility not to tell girls to say no, because you can't say no when it's coercive and abusive sex. You can't say no to rape and expect it not to happen. And you can't say no to the massive pressure that young women have upon them to become sexual objects and sexually available. What we have to do is to tell boys not to coerce, not to rape, not to be abusive. That's where we need to start. I don't want to see ever any unwanted pregnancy. I wish that no woman ever had to go through an abortion, but it is not feminist to say that we deny the rights because the fetus has more of a right to life than the woman has a right to make her choice, which is always a difficult choice.
Can I ask you how you feel about then? We saw a recent thing where a clinic was guilty of allowing abortion because it was a baby girl.
Absolutely outrageous.
But
absolutely outrageous.
But that woman wanted that abortion. If you follow your logical argument through, why should she have to carry on with the pregnancy? Obviously, I disagree with that, but
I think Julie argues from actually the more vulnerable of society, who are actually left with no choice and actually need to have support, perhaps by the government, in order to choose when they can terminate a baby, not whether they're choosing a sex of a baby. And I think that's where you're coming from.
Wrong. Yes, sex selection is outrageous. We see that it's yet another way to control women's bodies, and we see it's a way for men to shore up power by having sons and heirs. And so it's never all right to use abortion as sex selection. But a woman should have a right to choose to go through this awful, difficult procedure. She should not have to justify herself to a series of doctors and psychiatrists in order to say that she does not want to continue with the pregnancy.
I think some defence for the unborn child has to be built into the legislation, and I do. I've had children myself. Pregnancies are sort of sometimes fun, sometimes not. Morning sickness is not a great pleasure, etc. But it's not a death sentence, and it lasts 9 months. And I think women are rather brilliant at accepting things and getting on with it. And I think this is what we've got. We've got to give women every support possible so that they're not homeless and hungry and et cetera, but we've got to really go back to the fact from a feminist perspective that pregnancy is a natural part of the human condition. It's not an illness. You know, we talk about diagnosing pregnancy as if it's some, rare cancer that we've got. It's a natural process, and I think women can cope very well. What we've got to do is support them, and the offers of adoption are there. And so many of the pro-life activists will say every child is wanted by somebody.
If we had a situation where there was no sexual violence, no sexual coercion towards women and girls, and if we had reliable and safe contraception, I would absolutely agree with you. But we do not live in that state.
Well, let's try and create it.
Let's do that.
I'd like to thank all my guests, Josephine Quintavalle, founder of Comment on Reproductive Ethics, and Scanlan from Life Charity in London, and founder of the group Justice for Women, Julie Bindel.